Hey everyone, I want to greet Deb Stone and Becca Winston. We're looking at Spatial Invasive Infestation and Priority Analysis tool. And this is going to be a pretty cool presentation. I have put some links in the chat box. If you guys cannot see those links or they no longer appear for you, just send me or just type a message to the whole audience or to the organizers, however you want to do it, and I'll repost those. And now I will hand the reins off to Deb and we'll get started. Thanks, everybody.
All right, just give me 1 second here. Can you hear me okay? Just checking to make sure you can hear me and see the screen.
Looks like sound and video is good.
Awesome, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm Deb Stone. I am here wearing my UF hat. I'm a student at the School of Forest Resources and Conservation, currently working on my PhD. But I'm also working with the Florida State Parks with the Bureau of Natural and Cultural Resources up in Tallahassee. And so just to give you a quick idea of what we're planning to do here, I'm going to walk through a presentation that we often give that shows an overview of the project that we're working on. And then we're going to take a few minutes to answer any questions that have come up at that time. Then we're going to go to a in-depth, like how you actually get in and use both the desktop tool and the web version of the tool. So the Spatial Invasive Infestation and Priority Analysis, or Sippa tool, is something I created when I worked for the Nature Conservancy at a property that they manage in Central Florida. And so I'm going to give a little bit of information on the ArcGIS tool and the web-based tool, and then we're really going to dive in and look at those a bit more together. So adaptive management is a very important process within natural lands and conservation management. So it's essentially taking a data-driven approach to how we manage the conservation lands that we have. And this can be used not just with invasive species, but with rare species conservation, prescribed fire management, restoration, as well as a broader kind of general idea outside conservation in general. But the reality is that while a lot of people pay lip service to adaptive management, it's actually harder to do than we'd like to admit. So time spent planning is time spent or time lost for actually doing real work. So I wanted to develop something that could help streamline this process, increase consistency and decrease bias, and that would also help managers make actionable treatment plans. But at the same time, I didn't want to reinvent the wheel and wanted something that was relatively easy to use and adaptable. I mean, that's not asking for a lot, right? So what really is the tool? What's involved within it? I wanted something that would start out with a good core framework, but be easy, adaptable, and could use varying levels of data. It would take my input data and then wave a magic wand and give me a plan for what I needed to do, the actions I needed to do each year. So this tool that we created is something that can be used with relatively little customization, but you can also add on any different characteristic that you like, that you have any sort of spatial or attribute data for. At the time that I started this project, there were a lot of different prioritization systems out there already existing, but none of them were spatially explicit. They might consider an entire species across the landscape rather than individual populations of that one species. So I went with the plan that is provided, or the framework that's provided by the Nature Conservancy's draft weed management plan. And it considers these 4 characteristics here: the impacts of the species, the extent, the available control methods, and habitat quality. The reason I went with this is not just because I was a TNC employee and drank that Kool-Aid a long time ago, but also because these 4 characteristics are commonly recognized in the vast majority of other prioritization systems that are out there. So there's good support that these are critical characteristics for invasive species control. So this will take your customized framework and apply it to all your known invasive populations, and then give you a quickly computed output and something that's easily repeatable and shareable. So what do you need to run the tool out of the box? It's built to run currently with just an ArcGIS basic license. And your input data, you need a invasive species shapefile that has at the bare minimum a species designation, and ideally also acreage and a percent cover class estimate, which is essentially the density for that species within the acreage. You'd also need an invasive species table that includes some of the information on the known populations within your property, a habitat quality shapefile, and then if you want the full functionality of the tool, you also need a grid shapefile and a survey history shapefile. And the survey history shapefile is important because it allows you to differentiate between unknown and absence data. So how does the Sippa model work? In general, there are 2 tools within the model. You have an infestation analysis, and this is pretty much just like a quick health check, invasive species wise. So it's like the Fitbit app that you have, or a lot of us have. The priority analysis tool, this is what tells you how to improve the results of next year's health check. And this is the part in my presentation where usually I gloss over this really quickly. I've never gotten to present this to a GIS focus before. So I'm kind of excited to talk more about the actual tools and geeky stuff behind this process. And we'll dive into that more when we're doing the walkthrough. But the general steps for the priority analysis is it adds the needed fields and joins the species table. And then the core of it is it scores each population on the 4 characteristics we mentioned. And this is actually a pretty simple set of tools. You just have a select by, either select by attribute or a select by location, and then a calculate field tool. But it's a combination, an iterative approach to doing this that allows you to really get a lot of power out of this tool. It ends by giving a final score for each population based on the 4 characteristics. It creates a grid-based product and then compares it with your survey history with a spatial join. And the actual outputs that you get are essentially 3 maps. So this big one on the right that you see here, this is the Infested Areas Map. And you can see that by using this tool over time, I've been able to show a really good story of the amount of work that's been done and to evaluate the quality and impacts of the invasive species work that was done. If you look on the southern end of the property, you'll notice that we had an area that was initially highly invaded at first, where we were able to reduce the invasive levels to very low. But at the same time, once that started getting decreased, we're having a blow up or increase in invasion in another area of the property. So this allows us every year to evaluate our progress and readjust the plans for next year if needed. And it's the other 2 maps that help you make that plan. So you have your priority populations map, and this is essentially just a ranked list going down your attribute table of your highest priority population down to the lowest. And that combined in creates your priority areas map, because if you're like a lot of people, we want to be logistically efficient. So we may not want to run from one side of the property to the other just to go from down our list in highest priority. We might want to work on a certain area that has a high priority. So I would combine these 2 products together every year to create my annual work plan and to evaluate the success of my work last year. But the really big question that most people are asking is does it actually work? Is it worth it? So the impact, I think that this this tool had a very positive impact for the work that I did at the Disney Wilderness Preserve. So the table or the graph up on the top left shows the mean priority score over 5 years that I worked at this property. 2009 and 2010 were years that we did not have this tool, and it was created and implemented at the start of 2011. So essentially 2009 and 2010 are control data, and you can see the impact of the tool in 2011 through 2013. Now, the tool, the way it ranks is that if something gets a priority score of 1, it means that that is your highest priority. If it gets a priority score of 9, that is your lowest priority. So you can see the decisions I was making before I used this tool put my average priority score at about a 4, which isn't horrible, but it's not really great. But after using the tool, the treatment decisions improved to an average priority score of 2, or a very high priority. So this tool did improve my decision making and helped me make choices that were more in line with my stated priority framework. And this was done through changes such as shown in the 2 maps on the bottom right. So you can see the left of those 2 show a pasture restoration area where we did a pretty large amount of treatments, some of which were shown to be pretty low priority. So the next year, instead of continuing working on that and reducing those populations more, I cut my losses and switched over to another area that had a lot higher priority populations of invasive species. Now, it's not just the actual on-the-ground changes that can be adaptively managed through this tool. You can also adaptively manage your adaptive management. So over time, I decided that some of my input data could be tweaked and improved. The bottom left shows 2 habitat quality maps, the first one being the original one, which is based off the natural communities within the property. And eventually I went to a management zone map, which is kind of like the operational unit for the property. So just because I started out with one framework, I didn't feel stuck to it to continue on in perpetuity. I adjusted it to meet my needs. So that gives a basic overview of the desktop version of the tool. We'll dive in more later on, so I get to see a bit more detail once the rest of the presentation is over with. But if you wanted to access, at least the first link was put up within the chat box, but here's a way to download not just the version that we looked at, but a couple other versions of the tool for different scale study areas. And then there's also a publication in Ecological Restoration from a few years ago. Now, the web-based tool, most people don't want to touch GIS with a 10-foot pole. And the combination of GIS and invasive species together really makes them run away screaming. So we had a really amazing partnership with the Florida Forest Service through a grant that they received from the U.S. Forest Service and EDDMAPS, and we created a web-based version of this tool that makes the functionality accessible to a broader audience. But it doesn't just make it accessible to a broader audience. The most exciting part about this project, the web-based tool, is how it incorporates adaptive management and makes every single step of this process even easier. Through integrating with the desktop version of EDDMAPS through their various apps that you can get to use with your mobile devices, and through the database that they have, we've created a full system that streamlines the process of adaptive management for invasive species. So, hold on, let me go back. The first step is actually getting to EDDMAPS. And so this link here is another one of them that we'll put into the chat window. And it shows you how to access the site overview. And within this site, you can also directly access the web tool. So the very first part, once you've got into EDDMAPS, you get your account and you access this. Again, like I said, you've got the desktop, there's apps. If you collect your data in your own database, you can do bulk uploads, sending those in various different formats. So once your data is within the EDDMAPS database, you can then go to the web interface to access the Sippa web tool. You do not need any special software. You can access as many times as needed, and it is free to the end user. So this is the first interface that you'll see for the Southeast US version, specifically that's Florida, Georgia, and Alabama are the states that we have the tool available for currently, this version of the tool. So now it's going through and starting to use the tool. And there are 6 basic steps. You walk through the process automatically, and there is a ton of integrated help, and Becca will dive into this a little bit more later on. There's a lot of customization available within the web-based tool as well. We can't provide the full customization that you can get using the desktop, but it is a lot more user-friendly than the desktop tool. So the very first step is just selecting your data. We provide a few ways to query by attributes initially if you would like, but the most common method is going to be just kind of selecting the spatial location of your data. So there's many different ways, essentially drawing a polygon freehand or clicking points on the map to highlight which data you want to pull out and do your analysis on. So then next we have a somewhat repetitive process for each of the 4 characteristics. So you're going to see this general setup on all 4 characteristics. We provide essentially a writing prompt for you to review, to think about that characteristic and how you might want to rank and score it to classify it. And so there's many different ways to prioritize. When I'm talking about prioritization, the one thing I'd like to teach is that there's no one right way, but there is one wrong way, and that's not to do it explicitly. Because we make these decisions as essentially gut checks, but having a set framework allows us to be more effective and more efficient with our time and resources. So within the web-based tool, you can quickly adjust the number of classes, and you can give a brief description for each of the classes that you have selected and a weight. And then for habitat, we have the list of what habitats are found within your selected area based off what you selected in the first step. And then you assign each one of those habitat types to one of your selected classes. Now, based on your internet speed, the size of the data you select, it can be anywhere from less than a minute to 5 minutes or so at each one of these steps. So again, we repeat this process for the next characteristic, control, providing a little bit of information, pointing you to additional resources for determining your prioritization framework if you don't have one already. And then you go through the process of choosing your number of classes, giving a description and a weight, and then assigning those to the species that are found within your project area. Then you lather, rinse, and repeat for the impacts of the species. Looking at your writing prompt, determining what your framework is going to be, and assigning those a class again to each one of the species within your project area. The last characteristic is the extent, and this one is actually a pretty neat one. So the EDDMAPS database offers essentially 3 kind of classes of extent data associated with it. The lowest level is simply presence. There is no size information at all, and that is the vast majority of information within the database. So if there's no size associated, what we've used as a proxy is the distance to the next nearest infestation, the nearest neighbor. So our assumption here is that if it's a great distance to the nearest neighbor, it is a smaller and more isolated population, and therefore usually a higher priority. So based on what the selected data is, we automatically put you into, or put the process into the proper analysis. So it's either the distance to nearest neighbor, your gross acreage, or what's the infested acreage, which is a multiplication of your gross acreage and your estimated percent cover. So you can set these size classes yourself to any arbitrary number you like, and we also offer the option to use a natural breaks analysis to plug those numbers in and see where your natural breaks are in the data. So once your extent is done, you then get to get a final ranking. And sometimes you might want to weight all 4 characteristics evenly. Sometimes something like, say, habitat quality might be more or less important to you, and so you want to adjust that accordingly. And then the final step is a cutoff for your lowest priority, because it's very possible you may realize you have enough that you're not even going to get to the last set. So you might want to just not even consider those for your operational purposes. Now the outputs from the online tool, you get the table, essentially your attribute table that shows you the scores for each characteristic and the total score. And this can be used, again, if similar to the priority populations map in the desktop tool, is just adding these, going down your list in order. But we also, excuse me, we also have the priority areas function a lot in here, so you can move along in a more logistical fashion, targeting areas that are higher priority rather than just the individual populations. So now that you've done your prioritization framework and you have your results, you can start to move in and pull this data out. So if you do some GIS and you just don't want to fool around with customizing the desktop tool, you can pull this out and bring it into your Esri products to do more analysis. We also provide a preset report that has the full maps and the rankings. It shows your decision priority framework and the attribute table for your populations. And you can also add other data into the map. Let's say you have maybe some hydrological data or imperiled species data or something like that that you wanted to bring in. You can also change your background base map and produce the reports in various formats. And I think this is more being done in Utah than in Southeast Florida, but again, the integration into the full adaptive management is where you can get this data sent to Pro, so you have this information in an app on your mobile device. So this really helps with kind of the logistical planning and on-the-ground field work. So now we're at step 4 of the adaptive management process. So you've got all your information and you're able to go out and do the actual work. So you follow your treatment plan, you move down the list in whatever format you want, whether it's through your priority areas or your priority populations. You can put the data, once you've treated information, you can put that into EDDMAPS so that it logs that, and then come back in over time and start your monitoring and evaluation. Revisit the populations and see if you had effective treatments. And then this is the cycle of the adaptive management. Go back in and see if your goals were met, and if you need to reevaluate and start this process over again. So I mentioned Utah a little bit. We put the information in there. The stuff that they have done in adapting the Sippa tool to their needs is absolutely amazing. And Becca will chime in more on this later. I'm not going to do this part justice. So they've included a lot of different information. I think some of the coolest part is they have susceptibility models that have been done by other research that have been brought into this. So they can see not only where the invasive species are now, but where they are likely to move to in the future. They've made it a requirement for one of their grant applications. And if you look in the bottom right here, you can see that they have moved in, it's about 11 or 13 different items that they consider and prioritize beyond the 4 characteristics that were put in the original tool. So they're covering items like the wildlife impacts to grazing allotments, to water quality, as well as just drinking water impacts, impacts to wildfire. It's really cool, the different things that you can use your data to help make decisions here. The EDDMAPS Pro integration is going on. Becca's going to talk a little bit more about hopefully how well that has worked out. Other plans that they have are an admin dashboard for project tracking so that they can keep an eye on the entire project funding process. Climate change and soil data are going to be brought in. And then someday we're hoping to actually have a part that estimates potential spread without treatment. So summary, you're looking at, there's several different ways that you can access these tools, both the desktop and the online versions. But overall, prioritization is a must, as we can never get it all, and we want to do the best we can with the limited resources that we have. The Sippa model can quickly apply your own framework to all known populations and helps you transform that management plan from a dusty folder on the shelf to an actual treatment plan without sucking up a lot of your time. It also helps if you have a pre-existing prioritization framework and a well-maintained database, because like any excuse me, like any model, garbage in, garbage out. And that sums it up for our presentation. And we'll take some questions now.
Okay, so questions should be typed into the chat box for all the attendees, and I'll be able to read them to the presenters if you guys have any. Anybody? I'll give you guys a second. Let's see. Anybody? Okay, well, I guess moving on. Deb, do you want to switch or?
Yeah, if we can switch.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop showing. Two. I'm gonna make Becca presentation or the presenter.
Sure.
She can cover the web-based tool. I think I need a break from speaking.
I gotcha. Okay, Becca, Deb has switched you to presenter already, so if you're ready to share your screen, go ahead and do that. Great, and I can see it.
Perfect. Okay, so I am Becca Winston with Maya Consulting, and I collaborated with Deb through the project she talked about with the Florida Forest Service to create her actual Sippa model and take it onto the EDDMAPS platform and make it a web-based solution for everybody to use. And I know you guys are in Florida, and we've been talking about the Southeast one, but I'm going to actually be demoing the Utah version of it, just because we built in a lot more capabilities to this, and I want to show the final product and how that's being used for their project rankings. So if you guys want to do this hands-on with me, in the chat, there was also the actual link to the Utah one, and then there's the username and password. Super creative. It's demo and demo one. So anyway, if you want to go, that's the one I'm going to be following along with. And as Deb talked about too in the presentation, if you want to access the Florida one, back on this site right here, if you go down and it says try it out, you click on this button right here, this opens the actual application for Florida. And this is what it looks like when it opens, and then it's pretty much the same exact thing that we're going to be going through Utah, where it kind of walks you through each of the steps like this, and it does the final output. But anyway, that's what that looks like. This is the Florida one zoomed in. All right, so you hit Utah site. This is what it looks like. Just zoomed in a little bit here. And once you zoom in, you'll start to see the weed infestations pop up. There's a bunch of different tools that have been built into both the Southeast version and the Utah version. The toolbars are very similar in the way that you can access it, zoom in and out, look at map layers, things like that. Here is our layer list. Kind of tells us what we're looking at here. These are all of the weeds broke out by species. And then you can turn on and off, you know, so here's your biocontrol. You can get information about each different infestation, each different release, control, whatever, the different layers that Utah has chosen to have on their map. One of them is the hotspots. And so by zooming in and out, you can see like where in Utah they need to focus on or not focus on, or what's been mapped, what hasn't been mapped. You can see it taking a minute here drawing, but all right, we'll skip that. That's gonna be take. Oh, there it is. Anyway, and that's just calculated on the fly too. But so that being said, let's just look at the weed points here. We're going to be focused on an area near Salt Lake City that has to deal with the yellow star thistle. That's like their main priority for a project that they have there. So you zoom in, you can see the points on the map. You can switch your base map in case this isn't what you're looking for. And you can say, okay, now I'm going to switch over. Let's look at, how about imagery or streets. And then that just, you know, helps clean up your view, whatever you want. But for now, I'm just going to leave it on this one. You access the Sippa tool. And then once it opens, all the way through, there's help videos that have been incorporated at each step. So you can watch the video to say, okay, this is what, you know, this is prompting you or asking you to do, or you can just look at the actual help. And it's just screen tips all the way through. Just like that. Okay, so open it. Here's the explanation. Way to contact us if you have questions or anything like that. When you're ready to dive in, you get started. Again, there's the help video if you need, and we say, yep, we're ready to begin. First thing is to draw your infestation. The one in Southeast Florida that was developed has filters on there that you can filter by certain species, certain counties, or, you know, certain different characteristics of it to limit down the data that is drawn on the map that you want to run the model on. Utah's elected just to say, no, all the data right here is going to be included once you draw it on there. So in this case, we're going to grab one of our polygon tools, and we'll just draw around our project area, and we say execute, and it starts. And for Utah, we've streamlined the actual process, and so it takes about a minute or less for each step. And at each step, it's grabbing the different GIS layers and running calculations on them, clipping them to your project area, and then spitting them out back into the next step of the model. And all of this data is being fed from the EDDMAPS platform, and Deb kind of walked you through the steps on that. So if your data is not in EDDMAPS, it doesn't work. It's not one of those tools that you can just drag on data and then use. It has to actually be in the EDDMAPS database. So the first step is getting it mapped into the platform, and then it's updated live. And so once the points are in the EDDMAPS database, it automatically is feeding this tool, and it updates every 7 minutes. And so all the data is very current. All right, so the first step that we look at is habitat. And again, here's the questions that you can use to ask yourself. So which of these habitat types are most important to your management goals? Depending on what your project is, your habitat priorities will change. So in this example, we are going to look at, these are the project habitats in that area. So we've got forest, we've got shrub and herbs vegetation here, and we've got, we'll say, open rock. And so we look at this and we say, okay, these are the habitats in my project area. I'm going to go ahead and just use my slider. I'm going to say I have 3 priorities for habitat. I have a need to protect, which is going to be my highest priority. So I'm going to leave that as a weighted 1. I have somewhat important habitat. And then I have a least important habitat. All right, different rankings. So between 1 and 9, and this fits, so I don't need to change the weights here. And once I make the designations here, and then with the weight and the description, I go down and it's automatically imported down here. So I look at my forest and woodland, and for this project, that is my highest priority. So I am going to my computer's just completely froze. Okay. Give me 1 second. It won't work. All right, sorry. I'm just gonna jump right in again. I'll refresh it, and then it's always the danger of doing a live demo. Okay, I'll just jump in right there. And just a little bit different of an area. Actually, we'll do it right here. Okay. So just bring it. And this actually brings up a good point, because if it does freeze in this case, or you do something wrong and you think, no, this is not what I meant to do, and you can just refresh the browser and immediately it's cleared, and then you can start right over. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and leave it just for now. We'll just say it's the highest priority, medium, and the lowest priority. These are the weights. We come down here and we'll assign, forest is the highest. We'll say this one is the highest. This one is going to be the medium priority, and then the desert and the developed is our lowest. So we've figured out, yep, this meets our project goals, and execute to go to the next step. And it's pretty much the similar process for all of the steps. So this is your habitat. The next one is going to be control. And we're going to be looking at which species is going to be like the easiest to control or eradicate, especially over like a long-term goal for this project. And again, if you get stuck at any step, watch the help video, or you can look at the screen tips. In that step, behind the scenes, it went through and it grabbed all of the species that were in that exact project area, and it clipped it to it. And then it tells me how many of those infestations show up. So in this case, there was like 4 leafy spurge, 6 field bindweed, 66 star thistle, and for this project, we're going to be focusing on star thistle. So I can look at the different infestations that have shown up. I say, based on that, I'm going to do, let's do, how about 3 classes? And this one, The highest priority, again, can be, that's my ranking of 1, and my lowest priority is down to 9. I come down and I have to say, all right, so leafy spurge for this project is going to be a medium priority. Field bindweed would be my lowest. Poison hemlock, I'll say lowest. Yellow star thistle is my highest. Scotch thistle, that will be a high one. Hoary cress will be medium, and viper grass is my lowest. And it's automatically going to assign these weights to those based on the description I gave it. And then I'll execute, and then it'll take me to the next step, which is going to be impact. And with the impact, we're going to be looking at basically how much environmental or economic harm that it would cause, or how much impact for this specific project these weeds are going to be causing. So we go down, again, these are the weeds that we have to prioritize. So in this case, we're going to say we just want to do 2 classes, and we're going to give them a different description. So we'll say this one invades fast, and this can invade slower. Okay. Leafy spurge, for this project, we'll say, yep, that's actually a fast invader. So this is, we're going to leave that there. Bindweed will be slower. Hemlock, slower. Star thistle, definitely fast. Scotch thistle, that can be fast. Hoary cress and viper grass, we're going to say are slow. Execute it to bring it to the next step. The next one is extent, and as Deb talked about earlier, it's looking at the characteristics that are mapped for those infestations. So it's either the size of infestations, how much is covered in it, and see if that's calculated. And if we don't have that, then we look at the distance between the infestations. So again, the farther apart they are, that makes it more remote, more satellite, more top priority. If they're dense infestations close together, then we know, oh, most likely that's already a big infestation taking place. So again, we're looking at which size of infestation for this project is going to be our top priority, and which size of infestations is our lowest. And the first thing we do is we're going to run a preliminary analysis on our data to give us, we can see if we have the size of infestation mapped for this, or if we need to use the other measurement. So we just run it. We'll say for now, we'll go ahead and give it 4 classes, and we can change for as many as we need. Okay, so for this project, it looks like some of the characteristics of the infestation size was indeed documented in maps. So we're going to go ahead and use that. Again, this is just a suggestion. So we can take these numbers and then plug them in here. So it looks like our data goes from half of an acre all the way up to 10.61 acres. That looks like that's our largest. So using this as like a guide, we can say, okay, if it's less than, we'll say 1 acre, then that is our highest priority, because that's going to be smaller, remote infestations. We can say between 1 and 3 is our next priority. 3 to 5 will be that priority, and then 5 to 11, okay, will be our very lowest priority. And we just say, yep, we already know that that's already a big infestation, we'll say. And we come down and we execute it based on that. And so now we've looked at habitat, control, impact, and then finally extent. And now it's going to say, okay, now based on all of those characteristics, which one should we give more focus to, or should we split them up like in a certain way? So which characteristic is important? Is habitat more, or Should we focus more on the control aspect, on whether it's easy to control or not, or how much impact it's going to have to like the neighboring areas or the lands that we're trying to protect, and we can change the rank accordingly. Okay. In this case, I'm just going to say, since my project is just in general, it's looking at just the 4 of them, and there isn't any certain one that I want to focus on. I'm going to go ahead and leave them all at 25%. These do have to equal 100. So but I'll leave them all equally dispersed, and I can select which cutoff point I want. So I can say I'm not interested in any weed infestations that don't have a final ranking of, let's say, 8 or 9. I can say drop those off my results. I just want to look at just these higher priority ones here. Or I can say, you know what, just grab all of them and show me what I'm dealing with. In this case, we're going to leave them all and say, okay. Now, for the state of Utah, at this step, a lot more calculations are taking place. As Deb showed in that one screen graphic there, we're looking at like 13 other ones. So we're looking at whether it's an EDRR species or not. We also have project polygons that have been drawn on, and we're running that data against that to say it falls within this project area, rank it. If it adversely affects drinking water based on these specific polygons, rank it accordingly. If it has a wildlife effect, if it's within a sage grouse habitat, at this distance, rank this. If there's something called a QT score, and that's every single weed has a specific ranking, and that's based on the curve of where how many infestations show up in Utah and where it's considered a population in distance from each other. And we run that analysis every year, give it a score, and then it's running that score against exactly how many populations of that weed are populated in this project area. Anyway, it goes through a bunch of different ones, and the user doesn't see that, and I'll show you how that comes into play later, but it's important because it creates a ranking for this specific project in a very, very unbiased way. And when you go through the grant process in the state of Utah, you have a project narrative and a project description and stuff, and then it's a very competitive environment to get the money, and this gives the whole thing based on all of these attributes in a non-biased way, calculates it 0 to 100 based on those, and then that supports their decision for funding specific projects and not supporting the ones that rank lower. Okay, so here's your final output for what we drew on the map. Go ahead and zoom in just one more. Okay, this is our project area, and then it's given it a project grid, and that's calculated so it's all evenly spaced out, and then it puts the points in there and then calculates the score based on the point value of the ranking that fell within each of the grids. And just by looking at it, you'd say, okay, there's this one right here. If there's 1 point, we already know this is number 7, and this breaks down right here. So our top priorities are going to be red, lower priorities are the blues and the greens. And this helps us determine, based on the project goals that we entered into it, and again, completely customizable, based on those project goals, this is where we need to focus our efforts, our money, our time, our whatever it is. And for the state of Utah, you could come down and so that you can print the map, you can run the report, or you can download the file geodatabase. And when you download the file geodatabase, it includes all of these tables, I'll show you here in a second, that again, support the decisions of whether your project's going to get funded or not. If we were just to run the report, it's going to give us a map. Okay, it calculates the total acres for the project polygon that I drew. And then it tells us which percentage of this, first of all, the amount that of those acres that fall on federal, private, and state, and then which percentage of the project area it is. This is what I was trying to fill out as far as when I went through each step for habitat control, impact, and extent. This is my justification table. So this tells me this was calculated based on the habitat having 3 different classes, and these are the weights I gave them and the descriptions I gave them here. And this justifies why my map looks like the way it does. These are the species that fell within that project area, and it gives me right here, this is the QT score I just talked about, so it's ranked every single species as a group to say, this is the score for the dispersal in the state of Utah. This is the habitat that fell within there, and it would also pick up the biocontrol and the SIMP sites if there had been those in my project area. It would show those. So I can come up and just say, okay, go ahead and just print my PDF here, and here's my report. It's done. All right, by downloading the geodatabase, going to go through the different calculations there and put all the files together. It's going to clip the raster and attach that. And I end up getting, I think it's like 6 or 7 different files as part of this. And I'll jump into, I'll just jump it right now. Okay. So we've come over, we've downloaded the geodatabase, and these are the files that have come with it. So let's look at the Salt Lake one. Okay, so there's my project grid. There's the weed ranking. Again, the biocontrol sites that fell within there are SIMP monitoring plots, that did our QT scores. But if you come down to the tables, these are the tables that are included in it. And this part of it is the ranking. And this is the one that's the most important to the grant process. So these are everything that it's calculated behind the scenes based on those spatial layers. And then it's given it a total of 62 out of 100. And that determines a large chunk of if their project gets funded or not. And it's just based on these characteristics. It also will include, again, if you wanted just the acres fell within here or here, the way you prioritize or the different habitats or whatever. But this is all part of the geodatabase download, and the whole geodatabase has to be attached to the application. And let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so in this case, this is a project in Summit County, and their focus was knapweed and yellow star thistle. And it goes through, here's the actual application for it. Here's this, the project description, how we're going to treat it, the different budgets. This is everything. And then as you scroll down, here comes the Sippa as part of the attachment. And it has to be included to do it. And they are doing that not just to rank the project, but to also get every single project applicant thinking about what their project is going to encompass, what is their top priority, and how mapping is such a crucial component to it, and revisiting is such a crucial component. And so by encouraging the whole Sippa thing, you're encouraging the mapping component and then to prioritize and come up with your exact priorities in it and define your goals, and then get the data back into EDDMAPS to say, yes, it worked, no, it didn't work, yes, this has been eradicated, no, this hasn't, and now we're going to shift our project goals and then try again next year. And it makes that full circle complete by having Sippa as part of the application process. And again, this is just that full report included in it, in every single weed infestation. That's part of it. Okay, this is there's an example of just the map for their project area too. And then this helps them prioritize during the year. If they can go with the first wave of funding and say, okay, based on this, we're going to treat this, and this infestation. So, this one, maybe this one, and then they can come back and say, okay, we actually have more time and more this. Let's go with our second tier of priority, and let's go with here, here, and here. And then at the end of the year, if we have time, we can hit this one and this one. And it helps keep them, I guess, focused and heading in a certain direction. All right, back into, I wanted to cover just a few more of the tools that are available here. So we have, if you just wanted to look for specific weeds in the map and not just use it for Sippa, you can just look at all of the weeds. You can query out by specific names, or you can look by specific counties or CWMAs, or there's a lot of GIS-centric features that have been built into some of these base tools. You can query out spatially by doing spatial selections and drawing different things on there. And then we have, there's an interactive site chart here. And this helps us with our Utah monitoring plots or a SIMP plot that has been done. So in this case, this will be my last point, and then I'll turn back over to you, Deb. But if I wanted to look at, in this case, this is a SIMP plot, and I want to look at let's say the stems. This tells me it's got my whole year by year calculations here, and I can add this to the report. I can say, okay, instead of stems, let me look at, how about cover? And this tells me based on over the years, this is the cover for each of the sites. And I think, yep, I'm going to go ahead and add that to my report. I then can do a report summary. And I can say, go ahead and add the pictures from 2018 to it. If there was more pictures over the years, I could add those. I could add, if I wanted to do the soil type or precipitation or something here, I can enter comments here. And now you'll see that same format with the site analysis done. And then as it's drawing here, I'll just scroll down here. With the graphs that I had and the charts, I said add. So there was my stems, there's my cover, there was my picture image from 2018, and it's all part of the report. Just go ahead and close that for now. Okay, and again, I can turn on and off layers. In this case, we have like the counties, boundaries, things like that. Print things, I can draw on my map and do markups and get that included as part of my report or part of my base map that I want printed. And okay, I think that's kind of gives you the gist of the online version. And to access that, again, for Southeast, you can access it through the website, right there, the eddmaps.org/Florida/Sippa, and that will bring you here. And this kind of gives you an explanation, and there's help videos here that walk you through it, and then you can access it there. And if you want to play with Utah, there's the link and the password in the chat box. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, I'm open to it.
Okay, so I do see one question right here. How does the grant application process control for different groups giving different priority numbers, thus changing how important their project may look compared to others? So I think what we're trying to ask is, how do you choose priorities to make maybe one look more important than another in your project in comparison to other species?
So they have a whole group that gets together, and there's one for like water, there's one for fire, there's one for wildlife, there's one for the weed, and there's a whole bunch of different groups that have set the priorities, and they do it on state level, and they do it once a year. And then they, like, the results of what they say is what changes it. So if I understand the question. So,
yeah, how do you access that information?
So I get my information just from the Department of Ag. Okay. And so they give me the designated things, and then I take those and then put those into the GIS program and rank it accordingly. So if they have decided that this area has a high wildfire impact, high risk, and their top species are going to be, let's say, yellow star thistle and Russian knapweed, and therefore it's going to be ranked higher, and it falls within this designated area for protection of water quality, it's going to be ranked. All of those are fed into it and give it the score. But there's no way for someone to like cheat the system or to try to change their numbers. If, let's say, it doesn't fall within that wildlife area or the wildfire risk or water quality, then it's going to go lower automatically. And in the past, the people that could write very good grants and made them, a lot of money and time was spent on the narrative, they were the ones that got funded. And it was interesting when we started running them through an unbiased system and I guess ranking them accordingly side by side with ones that didn't have the grant writing and the spin on the narrative, how much different the funding process became.
Yeah, that seems important. There was one more other question. Were you using the United States National Grid Spatial Address System on that map? Do you know?
I wasn't.
Okay. Well, which one was it? Don't know.
Is there any other?
No, that was it. Okay, so do we want to pass back over to Deb? Okay. Do you know how to do that?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Oh, nope, maybe not. Hold on, Deb, sorry. I clicked this one. Try that.
All right, Becca, that is just like really awesome. The things that you've done with that in Utah are amazing. All right, so can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what you do implementing the desktop version, the process you go if you wanted to use that, and I'm sure after you see the steps that are involved here, you will go right back to the web version because that's just amazing when it's done. Both the Florida tool and the Utah are amazing. So when you download from the Conservation Gateway site, there are 3 options. Like I said, we tried the tool at 3 different spatial scales. So the small preserve is the Disney Wilderness Preserve that I talked about in the presentation. That's about 10,000 acres. We tried applying it at Apalachicola National Forest, about 600,000 acres, and added on additional characteristics looking at proximity to roads and proximity to imperiled species. And then we also tried a regional approach on a 5-county invasive species group in Central Florida, where we considered we had different spatial data inputs on the extent characteristic and some other, I think habitat quality, we used something different on that one as well. But when you download any one of the zip files that are on the Conservation Gateway site, you get essentially the same versions of these you see in the window. So you get a plant list DBF table. You get a symbology layer for the priority for the different layers that are outputs. You get the toolbox that contains the 2 tools within the Sippa models. And then you also get the draft weed management plan information that the Nature Conservancy wrote that is the basis for this tool. So within the tools, I tried to provide some pretty good documentation to answer a lot of the questions that you might have. So looking in the toolbox, as I mentioned in the presentation, you've got the infestation analysis and the priority analysis tools. And when you look at the description, I put in a lot of work on this, and it probably does need to be refreshed, but hopefully most of it will still be really useful. I give a brief summary. The illustration of the tool hopefully kind of breaks out and helps people conceptualize the processes that are going on behind the scenes in the tool. And then I give a lot of usage tips. So I tell you what files you're going to need for sure and what files you might need to run the tool, as well as a little bit of background information on each. I tell you what aspects of the tool you might need to modify to suit your own needs, or what you definitely will, and then what you might need to edit. And then through the various years of applying this tool, I've done like a brief kind of a problems and solutions in there on the things that I found most common errors. And then each parameter within the tool also has a little help prompt that would show up to when you're running it as a tool within ArcMap. It'll pop up in the tool help dialog box. So both tools have all this information that hopefully will make applying it a little bit easier for you. So the first step would be getting your input data ready in a format. There are a few specifics that are listed in the tool help that tell you some things such as file naming. It does look for specific fields, so having the fields within your input shapefile named properly. And then, of course, like we said earlier, garbage in, garbage out. So making sure your data is accurate and a true representation as possible of the situation out on the ground. And this is not just your invasive species populations, but like you see here, but also the habitat quality groups. If you had survey history, any other information you might want to have. Also have the invasive plant table, which looks similar to get the scientific common name and then ranks for the 2 characteristics. And as is done on the web tool, each species is assigned one of the classes within the prioritization framework. The other part you need to do is to determine your framework that you have. So if you don't already have something like done through the template, you might want to pull that up. Actually, let me show you what that looks like now. So these 2 documents will walk you through the process for the core characteristics, and then you could repeat a similar process for any other characteristics you might want to add in if you wanted to change the specifics. So it gives an overview of just invasive species management, the plans you might make, and then it gets you into setting your priorities. properties. And so here it takes you through the similar process that we did with the web tool of writing prompts, tells you the extent, and then this is a preset list. This is the framework that the Nature Conservancy came up with. I adapted it for what was working at my properties, and I encourage everyone else to do the same. But it gives you an idea of where to start from if you don't have your own prioritization framework. And honestly, this would be probably the biggest amount of work if you're going to implement this, would be getting the framework done, even then if you needed to tweak the tool and you know, add in different characteristics for yourself. This framework decision-making process is definitely going to take some time if you don't have one already. So if you wanted to change the model to add in different characteristics or change the classes, obviously you just go in and edit and make changes to it. And so this is where, you know, those of us that really do enjoy GIS would have a lot of fun, and everybody else would be heading for the nearest glass of whiskey. But as I said earlier, each characteristic is pretty much a simple select by attribute field and then calculate field. So you would need to add in additional fields for any new characteristics. And then if you wanted to change the number of classes, you could just select, let me go back and actually get the select. So you could just select and copy these, add a new one on if you wanted to put in another class, or you could delete if you wanted to reduce classes. And once you have a little bit of an idea of how the model works, it's not too hard to kind of go in and tweak as needed. So the last part, looking at habitat, that is a select by location. And I have tweaked the inputs for looking at both the habitat as a polygon feature class as a whole, and then also looking at a raster input. That's what we used for the web tool, was raster data. So it works not as is, but can be tweaked to work with raster data as well. These last steps, if you did not have survey history, you could delete the last few steps and then have it set up to run easily as a tool. Once you get the model set up and ready to work for yourself or your organization, it can be run like any tool. And this is another part where it's not nearly as user-friendly as the web-based tool. However, I did, like you saw earlier in catalog, we have pretty good help tips that are put into the tool dialog box. And if you wanted to really customize this and make it work for your organization, I would recommend adjusting the tooltips that are put in there to match whatever framework you just determine works for you. So some of these definitely help to have a GIS bent, as well as someone who works with invasive species to go through building up some of the queries to select the data. They aren't user-friendly like we were able to do on the web-based tool, but it's not a really high ask for someone who has decent GIS experience. And then in process, I think running anywhere from 5, maybe 10 minutes when I've had larger data sets. I want to say when I used the 5-county region, this tool took me maybe 15 or 20 minutes to run the entire tool process for that. And there were probably 40,000 data points that we were looking at within that data set. So that covers running the model as a tool. Future improvements, I've got plans to primarily create a new separate tool that would be included within the toolbox that would do some of the input data QC. So you would just choose your input file and then point it to the proper fields, and it would make any changes that are needed, so that and create a new copy so that you have a input to the tool to run the tool a lot easier, and it will reduce some of the upfront time that people would have to put in to adopt this desktop version of the tool. I also want to provide some sample data so that you can run and play around with it a little bit more. Having tried out somebody else's tool recently for the first time, I'm kind of trying to learn what it takes to put someone else's project onto my desktop. Finally, I need to do an ArcPro version. This was still, I think it was version 10.2 was the last time the tool was refreshed, and it's worked fine, but it does need a few tweaks to work within ArcPro. And finally, it would be nice, like you can see here, this tool interface is not nearly as user-friendly as the web-based tool. So I would like to try to find a way to make it maybe a bit more like what Becca was showing in the priority framework outputs, where you have a nice table like that, something that could be easier for people to kind of wrap their heads around when they're trying to run the tool. And that pretty much wraps up what I wanted to show about the desktop tool. Are there any questions?
So yeah, what groups in Florida are using this tool? Do you know?
You know, I do not. I do not have any access to people who have to the list of people who've downloaded it or what it's being used, the web-based tool. A lot of the organizations I've worked for recently, they didn't have a spatial database yet, and so if you don't have that shapefile with your input species, you can't really utilize the tool. So the Park Service, we're working on that right now to create that at least as an optional way for us to collect our invasive species data.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? Go ahead and type them in the questions box. We'll give you a second. And Deb, did you want to create a poll? Do you want to send me the details of that?
No, we don't need a poll now.
Okay. It doesn't look like we have any more questions, but I'll give them one more second. Okay, we have one more. Why would you want to use the ArcMap version versus the online version?
I think the only reason why you'd want to use the desktop version is if you wanted to have additional characteristics and you're here in Florida, there's something that's not within the online version. So let's say imperiled species is another thing. In modifying this tool for the Park Service, I'm sure that will be one thing that I bring in for us, because imperiled species management is a big part of the work that we do. So if species were close to a threatened or endangered species, if invasive species were close to them, that would become a higher priority for us.
I see. Anyone else have any other questions? Okay. It looks like no one's got any other questions. You guys want to give a final comment?
I don't have anything. Feel free to reach out to either of us at any point if you have problems, if you're interested in applying it, would like more tips or a little bit of help. We are both available.
Yep, I would agree with that. I would encourage you guys to jump on the online version, play around with it, and if you have any questions or running into any issues, let me know.
Alrighty. Thanks, Deb. Thanks, Becca. We actually might end a little early. I'm just going to check the questions one more time. And yeah, it looks like we're all good. We're all right. Well, I thank you all for coming to this last session of the day. You guys should tune in to the sessions tomorrow. If there's anything that interests you. And once again, thank you, Deb and Becca. This is very interesting on controlling invasive species spatially. All right, I'm going to stop the recording. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.